Okay, okay. Thank you very much for the invitation and for all the good presentation we already got. I'm going to speak about the Wallace catalogue in in a kind of non-traditional way. I was thinking it's a post-digital thing, so let's do it a little bit different. And it's also a way to come back to the period where I was interested in this question. I was studying sociology at the University of Lausanne back in the 90s, and that's how I started to bump into the name of Stewart Brand and the Wallace catalogue. At this time, it was not as fashionable as it is now, and so I'm glad that after 10 or 15 years, like the post, or maybe the digital era has finished, and we can come back to these questions. I'm going to come with some discussion about, let's see. I'm going to talk about this guy, Stewart Brand. He was a hippie. He was studying sociology. He's an archetype of the baby boomer, these people who grew up after the Second World War. And his first interest was in media installation, making a lot of stuff in the hippie scenes in New York and in San Francisco. He was part of the Merry Pranksters, and he synthesized, or he's a really good example of the kind of spirit and utopia that started to grow up back in the 60s in the US. So he is the kind of pretext to discuss about the context, the post-Second World War, the kind of influences, especially the art scene, and also, at last, the relation that this counterculture gets with the rise of the new economy. The idea to come back to these old school guys and topics kind of follow a Benjaminian statement that every epoch is inspired by the dreams of the people who were. No, you should read it, it's going to be easier. Never mind. So the idea that, starting with the progress of technological tools and the way we're discussing about technology, sometimes we forget that modernity keep the same kind of models and the same kind of logics. And sometimes it's also good, to think a little bit backward, to understand a little bit more the present. Coming back to the origin of the World Earth Catalogue and the context of the 60s, Stewart Brand is part of this generation who grew up during the Cold War. He was really afraid of an invasion of the Soviets. And you can read in some of his writing that he's really, really afraid. So one of the main goals of his career was to avoid, to be invaded by the Soviet Unions. The other big influence is the space race, and that's a period where the space race and the final frontier managed to provoke a lot of new imaginaries, new utopias. And the funny thing is that apparently Stewart Brand's mother was a really science fiction addict and passed it to her son. Another big influence of the context is the period of the creation of the public opinion, people trying to find a way to sell goods and with more and more efficient techniques. And one funny thing regarding Stewart Brand is that his father was a copywriter working in ad agency, so he was kind of part of this madman. And that was also something that really afraid, the young Stewart Brand, and because the white collar was for him a little bit like the Soviet Union. So it was a way to, in certain case, like lost his individuality and the freedom of speech. So that's the kind of thing he was writing when he was still a teenager. I will fight for individualism and personal liberty. Coming from somebody who is really influential in the counterculture, it's obviously a little bit. The other, like one of the first movements he took part was the new communalist movement. It's, as Samuel told it, all these young people leaving the cities to create or experiment new lifestyles in remote places in America. And so it was a real kind of laboratory. Some of them didn't last. Most of them didn't last. But it was a really influential step for Stewart Brand because he was always going from one commune to the other and learning from everybody and every communes what were the most important things that were useful in their everyday life. His first project was a kind of utopian, so he studied photography, so he was kind of linked to the idea of the importance of vision and how images can affect the way we perceive the world. And his first project was the creation of a pin asking or kind of lobbying the NASA to show a photograph of the whole Earth. For him, it was a really important statement because it was a way maybe to consider that like everything was interrelated and that we were all part of the same system. And it worked. The picture, like the first picture of the whole Earth, taken during the 68 Apollo mission, was broadcast largely and actually affected, like in some way, the way the mainstream audience could perceive the Earth. That's what Stewart Brand said about it. It's also interesting to feel about the importance of globality and the way that for him that was a trick, like for global politics, global economy, and so on. So since these pictures coincided with the launch of his first issue, he used it as a like the main figure that is going to be used for all the further issues. And so it was, what is important about like the title, like about the idea of the whole Earth catalogue, of course, and the access to tools. So what he wanted is to provide to the people living in the communes all the tools necessary for a sustainable everyday life. So what they made in the catalogue was to provide materials. Here is the function, gives more ID. So useful as tool. Tool is the main point. A tool can be a book, can be a ladder, can be everything that is useful, like to improve the everyday life in the commune. High quality or low cost, relevant to independent education, it's important, individuality, not already common knowledge, easily available by mail. So that's the kind of function. I didn't mention it, but the catalogue is a kind of oversized paperback, something like this size, and quite like a heavy object. Inside, the originality was that like there was no proper orders, some categories, but The idea was to provide all the information in a kind of syncretic and random way to allow the reader to find his own path in this mass of data or information. So the idea, and coming from the picture of the Earth from space, was to say that the reader was a kind of astronaut, like kind of overviewing the different things of the world, and like trying to make his path in all this information. And then, of course, you know, Buckminster Fuller, a really strong influence. You cannot really read it, but it's presentation, different kind of items that you can find. And always space, the poster, which I'm sure is a really expensive collector now. So the idea was really to think that the reader was a kind of visionary, and to put him in this situation that is totally in control of the different objects and the different way he wants to go through the book. There was also all the kind of hippie cliché. And this page is quite like give a good idea of this kind of syncretic approach. You have like the surface of the earth, and then like the skin, and all, you know, the infinite, the really big or the really far is also is closely associated to the really close and the really personal. So. And yeah, I didn't mention it, but there was a lot of influences from the non-Western philosophies, and in this syncretic approach, there was also this drive, or this wish to discuss about non-Western influences. Okay, and that's the statement that is at the opening of the catalogue, and we are as God, and might as well get used to it. And yeah. And so if I do the, you know, yeah, you can read it. I'm a bit too late. Tools that aid this process are thought and promoted by the world as catalogue. Give power of the individual to conduct his own education, his own inspiration, shape his own environment. The the ecological aspect is also really, really important in the process. Okay. After the first issue in '68, he produced a series of like it's the whole collection. It's 80. I like it. I was expecting to make it earlier, you know. So, oh yeah, 1968. That's the last one of the first series is 1971, and then it should be something like I don't know, 75 maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not going to write. This one is 1995. It's 29. And yeah, this one is 74. Okay. So that's the whole collection. But it didn't finish at this time. Like I'm going to come back later, but like the whole her story went to further different kind of iterations. It became a proper Bible, not only for Steve Jobs, but like for a whole culture interested in information theory, personal computer, DIY publishing, architecture, ecology, cosmogony, it's another thing, but design. So all these kind of topics were really like concentrate in the Water's catalog. Oh, 3 minutes? Oof. Okay. Sorry guys, I'm really late. 5. Okay. Okay, but there was nothing related to war, there was nothing related to race, no queer, no feminism, which is quite strange at this time where it was quite like the... And in the same time, there was no sex, no drugs, no rock and roll, which is also strange because back in the 60s, it was quite common. In some way, he was following the Buckminster Fuller's, thinking that like a proper technocentric approach would like totally erase traditional way of being active politically. So Fuller was a really, really influential figure for Brand. Now I have to be really fast because otherwise I'm not going to finish it properly. So at a certain point, Brand was part of the USCO. It was an art collective based in New York and was really interested into multimedia. So they were performing like some really interesting like experiences with the sense, the stimulus or the stimuli, and the way it could affect the perception of the viewers. It was called the USCO for the Company of Us. We are all one. So this is influences that definitely affect the way Brand worked on the catalog. I'm going to go fast, otherwise, okay. Sorry. USCO was quite popular and fashionable. That's something we expected, we still expect that these countercultural initiatives were quite like people working in their remote places, but they already made like the highlight of the mainstream press. That's in 1966, so these guys were already like kind of famous. And obviously like the big influence was the all the information theory, people from the cybernetic background, Buckminster Fuller, Norbert Wiener, Marshall McLuhan, all these people were really influential. Sorry if you cannot read. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I have to go. I just try to finish it. It's okay. Yeah, it should take. Okay, c'est bon? Okay, cool. So the other interesting thing, so I went through, like there was a lot of things to say about information theory, but like go straight to the hardware. And the interesting thing is kind of geographically, you could, like the first studio office of the Water's catalog was in Menlo Park, who are now like the place where it's kind of the hub of the Silicon Valley. And there was some links, really interesting links, which happened at this time between like the people working for the Water's catalog and the people working for the emerging computer culture. You could already see, like in the pages of the catalog, some mention to a proto-calculator, and like this guy is quite important, Robert Albrecht, because he developed and created the first hobbyist club called the Homebrew Computer Club, and that's where like the guys from Apple came for the first time to show their first prototype of the Apple 001. It's not the right, but the right code. But so that's an important sentence from Fred Turner. Most of his like approaches is like really well explained in from counterculture to cyberculture from Fred Turner, who is a kind of biographer of Stewart Brand. And he made this really good explanation about how the oldest catalog was a kind of network forum, and like Brand was at the center of many networks. Among these networks, I'm almost finished now. So just so he worked later, like it's 84. Oops, 84. And this is, I'm not sure, but it's also early 80s, like maybe 83. So he was like already related to the Media Lab, made this first catalog related to softwares, like in the early 80s, so it's 30 years ago. Was the founder of the first, that's him, the founder of the Well, like one of the first online community, really influential, part of this people like pushed up by the Wired magazine. We are in 97. And some people of the Well became really influential in the discourses related to cyberspace, especially Howard Rheingold, who came with the idea of virtual reality. Howard Rheingold, the virtual communities and virtual reality. The EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, so that like you are as a sticker on his computer, who also became quite famous. Yeah. And Snowden has the same sticker, like it made like a huge impact, like for the association, I'm sure. Kevin Kelly, who is the executive or one of the founder of the Wired magazine, and who was also one of the influential people talking about new economy. We are in 99 and 97. So that's these kind of topics were already like really present at this time. And we're back to Stewart. And Stewart now is kind of working a lot regarding environmental question, ecological question, like with kind of a polemical stance, and launched this Long No Foundation, which is a seminar with the people from Wired, Kevin Kelly, and trying to change the time. All right, I'm going to finish maybe with this one. And let's do that one. So because there is an end, and that's the end. That's the end. Sorry. Branding the wall. So we had like the instruction or some teachings coming from the 60s, and now the question is like, what kind of teaching can we get from now on? Thank you.